Does it go back and forth?
No, I don't have that good of a technology. Okay, so one of the things I want to make sure that we start out, I'm going to show you on this screen, whoops, not on that one. I'm going to make this larger because we've got to go back in time just a little bit in the time machine. So I'm going to hit present.
Wait, where is it?
So, you remember whenever we were doing our ELA book and we had all the different pages that you had to put like 3.1 and 3.2, and this week we're on 3.3. Well, so the very first page that you did was a 3.1. And you remember you wrote down what the standard was. And first we're going to talk about reminding ourselves of what that standard was that week. It was, read it with me, ask and answer questions to demonstrate understanding of a text, referring explicitly to the text as a basis for answers. And you remember, even though you wrote it like this, it really comes down to knowing the essential question, which is, there were two, but the one we're going to deal with today is, how can I prove that I understand a text by referring to the text for the answers that I give? And referring, we talked about the word refer. What does refer to? If I say refer to the text, you remember? You are remembering, but in a way you are having to point back to it and show. And in our case, when you're doing a passage, the way you refer back to the text is you take the question number and put it back in the passage to where you found the answer. Okay, so that kind of brings us back to the assignment that we have today. Because you are going to be referring back to the text. But the first thing we're going to do together to give you an idea of how to do this assignment. You remember a moment ago I showed you this in a book, sort of like that? Okay. Well, today, when it says referring to the text for the answers that I give, when you first look at this, what do we call this type of thing on paper? We talked about this before. A graphic organizer. Good job. Graphic organizer. So in a text, when you are reading questions, if you're taking some sort of test, you're looking at the questions. But sometimes you have to fill out a graphic organizer. And that's very similar to looking at questions. So would we just read the text first, or would we read the things that are in the graphic organizer?
Graphic organizer.
Because if we are trying to make sure that we understand what we're looking for and we're reading for meaning, then we need to understand what are we looking for. If you look at this graphic organizer, there are 3 columns. Do you see that? The first one is blank. It says proof for. The next one says statement. Is a statement a question?
No.
It's when somebody is making a statement, but it could have been their opinion or it could be fact. Okay, so we're going to hold on to that for a moment. And this is proof against. When we look at this very first entry under statement, it says, Jack had a reason to want the harp. Agree or disagree? So is it technically asking you a question? Even though it's a statement, they're asking you whether or not you agree or do you disagree. So that is technically a question. Hold on one second. Let's do the second one, then I'll come back for questions. Next, it says, Jack's mother refused to help. And you have a box to agree or disagree. So again, it's almost like a question because you have to decide whether or not you agree with the statement. Now, right now, we've not read this. You probably have an idea what story this is from, but we've not read this particular passage, correct? Okay. So could we even right this minute begin to put agree or disagree?
Kind of.
We have opinions, but we haven't read the text yet. Right now, we're just trying to find out what are they looking for. Yes, ma'am.
It's like true or false.
It is like, because you're saying agree means I believe the statement is true. Disagree would mean I believe the statement is false. Alan.
What this thing, what you wrote down reminds me of Jack and the Beanstalk.
Okay, so that is background knowledge. So you're already saying, I think I know what they're talking about, which is absolutely perfect. JC.
Yeah, but it's Jack and the Beanstalk. I don't think they said anything about heart.
Good job. She said she doesn't remember a harp. And Jack and the Beanstalk is a very old folk tale, right? So are there several versions? Because if somebody's grandmother told them this story and somebody's grandpa told a different one, and it's written in lots of books, they may have a little bit of variety in the way they've
I
told it.
remember a show about that one, except it was Mickey Mouse, and Goofy and Donald.
Yeah, and he was dressed just the same way, wasn't he?
I
Very good job.
remember the Jack and the Beanstalk my grandma told me, where he had a cat and a dog that, and the guy he said he would give him a puppy, so he traded.
Okay, so, and you see your family is from Yemen. So do you think there's a chance that he has heard a different Jack and the Beanstalk than you have?
Yes.
And could be in different books. So that's exactly right. She says, I don't remember the harp. You remember different versions. And so could we really begin to guess in this?
Yes.
Well, no, we start to use our background knowledge of thinking what it reminds us of, but we don't want to go now and agree or disagree because we've not actually sat and read the text. Now, if I'm thinking about, well, what in the world are they asking me to do? Well, I have to decide if I agree or disagree, if I think it's true or false. And if I think yes, when I look at my passage and I've read it, if I agree it's true, I have to refer back to the text to find proof, right, that I understand. So if it's proving for that I agree with this, it's going to be here. I am agreeing with. I have proof for this statement being true. But if I say, no, that statement's false and I disagree, I'm going to say I have proof from the text that proves this is not true. It's against what this statement is, okay? We're going to do this one together so that it makes a lot more sense. Yes, Jason?
So, like, if they have a question, it's like proof for, proof against. Does that mean you have to have proof so they know you're right?
Yes. And you know it's the exact same thing when you do a passage and you go back into the passage and you say, this is my answer for number 1. I found my answer here. So I'm proving that my answer is correct because I found it right here. Do I want to find it in here?
No.
I don't want to try to remember it when I've got that passage right there. That's the ideal thing about when we say look back at your text. You should never try to remember because your memory can be, it can be wrong. Well, not bad, but you've got so many things in life to remember. Your brain's trying to remember things that are important. If there's a small detail in one story, it might not hold on to it, but the story did, and you can go back to the story. Allie, you're my last one before
I still remember when I got my shot when I was 3 years old.
because it was important to your brain to remember that, wasn't it? All right, we're going to look quickly at the actual passage so that we can read it together. And we'll make sure we got it lit up. And I know it's a little difficult to read because it's up here on this thing, but I don't want to blow it up too much. But take a second to kind of get your eyes focused in on it. You're correct. Somebody said, I knew it. It's because the story is Jack and the Beanstalk. In this case, it says adapted from the Red Fairy book by Andrew Lang. So the adapted, does that mean, it means that the story is a small portion of a larger story. Okay, that's what they mean. All right. If you can see it, I'm going to invite you to read along with me. If you can't, that's fine. But if you can, read along with me. Jack seized the golden harp that had belonged to his father and ran away with it. But as he raced toward the castle doorway, the harp called out, Master, Master! The giant woke up with a deafening roar. He sprang from his seat and in 2 strides had reached the door. But Jack was very nimble and he fled like lightning with the harp. The furious giant tore after him so fast that he nearly touched poor Jack. He stretched out his enormous hand to catch him. But luckily, just at that moment, the giant stepped on a loose stone, stumbled, and fell flat on the ground. The accident gave Jack enough time to grasp the beanstalk and scramble down it. But when he reached his own garden, he saw the giant descending after him. "Mother, mother," demanded Jack, "make haste and give me the hatchet." His mother ran to him with a hatchet in her hand, and with one tremendous blow, Jack cut through all the beanstalks except one. "Now, mother, stand out of the way," said he. Just as the giant took hold of the last branch of the beanstalk, Jack cut through the stem. Down came the giant with a terrible crash. So now, does this story kind of match the story you recall being read to you or told to you in the past?
Yes.
Some things may have been similar and some things may have been a little bit different. So when we look up at our statements now you have a better idea of what the person who made this graphic organizer is asking you. Again, proof for column, proof against column, and then the statements that they're making as facts, but you know it could be a true statement or it may be a false statement based on that passage. It said Jack had a reason to want the harp. We go back to our story and find the word harp. It says Jack seized the golden harp that had belonged to his father and ran away with it. But as he raced toward the castle doorway, the harp called out, "Master, master." So that's where it's telling you about the harp. The statement is Jack had a reason to want the harp. Do you agree or disagree? Let's see, Braylon, do you agree or disagree? You agree. If you agree with that statement, raise your hands. Okay, put your hands down. If you disagree with this statement, raise your hand. You disagree with that statement? All right, so let's go with this. Ella, why do you disagree with that statement? Why would you say it was proof against him wanting the harp, that he had a reason to want the harp? And it has to be from here. It has to be from the actual text. Proof.
He ran away with it, and so if he ran away with it, then and he tried to like take it, then it's kind of like when you take something and if you don't want it, you just put it down because it's like he
But let me stop you for just a second. I want you to look at a very important word. Because what you're telling us is what you perhaps are thinking through. But when you have to prove something to somebody from a text, you couldn't say, well, this is what my reasoning is necessarily. If you're working on proving it from the text, you would have to be able to come and find that. But what you're saying is something you're thinking may happen, but it would need to be something that was talked about. So could you think of anything in here that definitely in the text said why he shouldn't want the harp?
well, because he might have got scared because it.
But Ella, think for just a second. I know what you're saying, but did it say he got scared? So I'm going to leave you just a second to think about that. Proof means you have to be able to point to it. So I'll come back to you. JC. Now, are you still in the proof against? You're saying you don't agree with this statement? Okay. So why would you say from the actual text why he would not have a reason to want the harp?
Because it says Jack seized the golden harp that had belonged to his father and ran away with it. And it didn't say the reason why Jack ran away with it.
Okay, but it says Jack seized the golden harp that had belonged to his father and ran away with it. So he took it. All right, Allie?
I missed proof 4.
Okay, all right, so have you changed over to proof 4? You agree with it now? All right, we're going to do some agreement. Give me proof of why Jack had a reason to want the harp. If you say, I agree, and many of you do. Allie, what would you have said is proof for why he had a reason to want the harp?
So he could get the giant to, because of the giant, because when he woke up, he was chasing after him.
Okay, but that would be why the giant had a reason to want the harp.
Oh no.
We want to know why why Jack, so let me come back to you. All right, Eli, why would you say is proof from the text for why Jack had a reason to want the harp?
Because it was his dad's.
So come point to it. Come point to where it is in the text. And I'm going to have you stand beside it so that we can write it word for word. Do you see it belonged to his father? It belonged to his father. So how many of you saw that right off the bat and knew that was to be the case? That was the proof. Okay. All right, so point to, and so don't touch, but just point to the area that we would need to use as proof, okay? You can go back to the very top to where it talked about it. So if I wanted to say proof for why Jack had a reason to want the harp, if you said you agree Jack had a reason to want the harp, in proof for why this statement was true, if you need to put true, you can do that. Then we would say, Jack, I want it to be a quote, so I'm going to put quote marks. Jack seized the golden harp that had belonged to, thank you.
His dad.
Yes, his father. Okay. Now, I know there's not a period at that part, but I can put dot, 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 because there would have been more, and in my quotes. Thank you, Eli. I appreciate it. All right, have a seat for me, hon. Thank you. Do you see how this proved? If he says the statement, Jack had a reason to want the harp was true, he agreed with that, and you said, well, prove it to me from the text. Jack sees the harp that had belonged to his father. So he had a reason to want the harp. Okay, let's go down to the next statement. Jack's mother refused to help. So let's go in the passage to where Mom enters the scene. You start to see the word Mom, correct?
Yes.
All right. The accident gave Jack enough time to grasp the beanstalk and scramble down. But when he reached his own garden, he saw the giant descending after him. Mother, mother, demanded Jack, make haste and give me the hatchet. His mother ran to him with a hatchet in her hand, and with one tremendous blow, Jack cut through the beanstalk, all the beanstalks except one. Now, mother, stand out of the way, he said. Now, do you agree or disagree?
Disagree.
All right, wait, you gotta wait till you raise your hand. Jack's mother refused to help. Let's have a hand raised for what you would like to agree or disagree. All right, Dolly, agree or disagree?
Disagree because it says that his mother ran out with what Jack had asked for, which was a hatchet.
So if you so come to me and come to the board and point to where a quote would be that would be proof for what you're saying for why. Yeah, there we go. Or proof against. I said backwards. His mother ran to him with a hatchet in her hand. And we can stop there. So do you agree with what Dolly said? Dolly says Jack's mother refused to help, that she disagrees with that. And that is her proof. If you agree with Dolly, raise your hand. If you agree with Dolly, raise your hand. All right, put your hands down. If you disagree with Dolly, raise your hand. Very good. So Dolly, stay with me. Jack's mother refused to help. You say you disagree with that statement, and she points her proof as his
mother
ran, okay,
to him
with
the hatchet in her hand.
the hatchet in her hand.
And then it starts with a comma after.
So I'll put my little dots and some quote marks. Now, did Dolly get her proof from her mind or her memory from other things, or directly from the text?
Directly from the text.
Thank you, Dolly. You can have a seat.
I put a little bit of my own words.
True, but and she did, so when she was thinking it through, she did use her own words. But when she was giving me the quote, it came directly from the text. Okay. Now, before we move on, are there any questions about this particular one? Anybody at all? Do you understand how we did this? You're going to have an activity in just a few minutes. I'm going to hold it up. I don't know where I laid it. You're going to have a small little sheet, but when I hold it up in here, you're going to see that it's written just in the same typographic organizer. There's a proof for, There's a row of statements and a proof against. There's also blocks for agree and disagree. Do you see that? But you're going to have your own book to work on this. So I'm going to pull up the instructions so we can talk about the instructions step by step while we're looking at them. Yeah, I just had it there for a second. Okay. So you're actually doing this exact same exercise. And poof, there we go. Independent work. And so no, if you're asking about the headphones during this independent work, no, because this is a brand new thing I don't want you to mess up with. You're going to read the statements. That's your first step. Step number 1, read the statements. Then you're going to read the text. And the text will come whenever we have RWW. Have you learned what that means yet? Reading, writing, workshop. Yep, here you go. Reading, writing, workshop. It's always your smaller book, okay? So you're going to read the text beginning with page 70 through 74. What do you do then?
You read the text.
You read the text again. And Miss Dean caught herself right in the middle of the activity. She read it how many times?
What?
I didn't go back and read it the second time. Bad Miss Dean. But we will read the text again. Then you're going to read each statement. Even though you've read it once, do you need to go back and read them again?
Because you can't remember.
You wouldn't remember where they were. I couldn't, and I wrote them. And it says, check if you agree or disagree. Document from the text. Do you put it in your own words? No, it's got to come straight quote from your text. Direct quotes, as we've done here, that support your decision to agree or disagree. You're using key details to support your agreeing or disagreeing. If you're starting to go back in the book and write down whether or not you agree or disagree and find your quotes, and you find out you need to change from agree to disagree or back and forth, can you do that?
Yes.
That absolutely, because that's the point of looking back. You may find out that you have been wrong. That's right. Make sure before it's turned in it has your name on the top of the sheet. Then put your completed sheet on the horseshoe table. Then read silently at your desk until you're told to do otherwise. First of all, open your reading, writing workshop book to page 70. I'll be right with you. Okay, give me 1 second, okay? 1 second. Yes. Yes. Carlos, do you want to go with him? Carlos, do you want to go with him to the bathroom? Go ahead and open to page 70. Page 70. You can see that the name of the story is Mary Anderson's Great Invention. And we've been talking this week about inventions because yesterday the inventor was Thomas Edison. So it's the same thing. All right, before I put you on this independent work, do you have any questions? Allie?
Are you going to work it with us?
So no, because this one I did with you, this one I need you to do independently. I have a few people I'm going to have to help, but most of you, if you've got questions, you'll raise your hand and I'll come around and help you. Yes, ma'am.
Where do we put that we agree?
It has a little box for checking for agree and a little box for checking if you disagree. Okay? Yeah, it's little tiny. When you have your own, you'll be able to see. And if you have questions, I'll come to you. Right? But this needs to be as much independent as it possibly can be. Yes, ma'am.
I did this type of thing at my old school, but it was true or false, and you had the color in the face.
Oh, so you've got some.
Smiley,
Yep.
frown.
You got some experience with that. Yeah, I'll be helping Anthony and Carlos some, but I will be back there at the table with them, so you can certainly stop and ask me questions. I'll raise your hand. Okay? Do you come to us back there?
No.
But you can raise your hand. Okay. I'm going to bring your sheet around to you. You can go ahead and start with your instructions, which I will leave up there so that you don't have to remember those. Okay? Go ahead. And Corey, in a moment, do you want to come back? Do you want to just try it on your own to start with? If you don't, you want to come back there with Carlos and Anthony and I, you may. Okay, just want to join me at the horseshoe table. That will be perfectly fine. Corey, did I give you one yet?